Everyone has their favourite faction in Warhammer 3. Whether you enjoy the righteous unification of the elector count states or the ruinous razing of the entire world, your favourite faction says a lot about you. So today, let's go through each faction in the game and what it says about you if they're your favourites. And yes, these are all facts backed up by hours of research, and my sources will be listed in the description. But first, pick up some cheap games with instant gaming. In this quiet period between game releases, there's no better time to catch up on everything that you've missed, but that can be pretty expensive. Well, with instant gaming, you don't need to worry, as they have thousands of games cheaper than you can find them anywhere else on whatever platform you could ask for. Whether that's completing your Warhammer 3 DLC collection, hopping on that Baldur's Gate 3 train now the hype has finally died down, or finally seeing what this Minecraft is all about, they have you covered. And just to put your mind at ease, this is all also backed up by their legendary 24/7 customer service. So use the link below to grab yourself some cheap games, and thanks again to Instant Gaming for partnering with the channel. If your favourite faction is the Beastmen, then I can only assume that you just want to see the world burn. Unlike other factions who have the Chaos Gods or Conquest to justify their wanton destruction of the world and its inhabitants, you simply seek to see everything civilized and peaceful razed to the ground. Occasionally, you might kid yourself into believing that you're doing this for some vague, chaotic deity, but we all know that you're mainly in this game for the diet. Where others might see a bloody pile of viscera and recoil in horror, you instead grab a plate and head over like it's a breakfast buffet. And lastly, you're absolutely the type of person to post pictures of your pets and call them your fur baby. It doesn't matter how many imperial horses they chase across the prairie, you'll never put them on a leash, because they wouldn't hurt anything you didn't tell them to, and all those times it happened before, the animal or person or building was probably asking for it. We all know why anyone would have their favourite faction as Bretonnia, and here's a clue: it's not the feudal economy. No, you're here for the lady. You've been a tier 3 sub in her streams for years in the hopes that one day she might bathe in the waters of the lake and write your name on her arm and finally know who you are. It doesn't matter if she asks you to work the fields and make pennies whilst your lords make millions, you will do whatever she says without a moment of hesitation. You could say that you're one of her goons, and that you will fulfill this goon duty until the day you die. Can I get away with saying that without being demonetized? Let's find out. Now, the alternative here is that you're perhaps not a tier 3 sub goon, but you could just be a horse girl, in which case make sure that someone accompanies you when you're going to the Grail Knights to get them ready for combat. Sigmar only knows what could happen if not. If your favourite factions are the Chaos Dwarfs, then I can only imagine that you're an oil tycoon, and not just because how else would you afford their DLC? You truly do not care for people, both in real life and in games. You put all of your sims into a swimming pool and take away the ladder. If there is a way that you can make characters in games suffer, then you do it. So collecting voluntary workers to fuel your factories is just a drop in the bucket. And if anyone asks about all those awful emissions being made as a result of all those armaments being produced, well, who cares? Climate change sure isn't real to you, it was always 52 degrees in the equator. I honestly flat out refuse to believe that the Daemons of Chaos is anyone's favourite faction, but hypothetically, if this person did exist, they're for sure one of those people that spends hours upon hours in the character creation screen and never actually get around to playing the game. You've absolutely made hundreds of tabs in Baldur's Gate 3, but you've yet to get out of Act 1. You've played Cyberpunk 2077 and spent as much time in the clothes shop searching for just the right fit as you did being gay and doing crime, like God intended. Every single turn you spend far too long swapping different pieces of your special demon in and out until you find just the right mix of stats and aesthetics, only to scrap everything and change it all again next turn anyway. You're also probably absolutely begging for a rework because holy moly, this faction is trash. If your favourite faction is the Dark Elves, then I hate to say it, but you're just an edgelord with a mommy king. I mean, I could elaborate, but do I really need to? Other than to extend the video for ad revenue purposes, of course. The Dark Elves don't really do anything that no other faction can't do, so the only real reason to play them is the edginess. Ooh, aren't you so evil? You're wearing all black and eyeliner. The only thing actually evil is serving that hard for it all to be for your mother. I mean, there's no monetizable way for me to say what you know I need to say, but let's just say that you have a real close relationship with mommy, which is great for you, buddy. Just let me know if you have any brother sons or sister daughters come out with webbed hands and feet. Now, I know you Dowie enjoyers don't like when I talk about height, so I won't even mention it. Instead, let's unpack why you all seem to take any inconvenience or difference of opinion as a personal slight. I mean, to keep things short. Every time we talk about the dwarves, I get all of these comments about putting it in the book. I tell you, the only thing that you should be putting in the book is some anger management classes. Not every little thing is personal. Sometimes tiny things happen that can just happen, and there was no malice involved at all. That said, you're short, stick your book up your butt. I've said this many times before, but if the Empire is your favourite faction in Warhammer, then you just want to play historical Total War and you are coping hard. You see all of these lizards and elves and rats and are physically repulsed at the thought of playing as one of these fantastical creatures. You'd much rather play as a human because you're a human and representation matters. Just ask Star Wars fans. Even so, you have to navigate the minefield of magical units and monsters and especially flying horses to keep things pure. You see yourself as not only fighting as the Empire defending it from invaders, but as a human, historical Total War player fighting back against this tide of fantasy BS. If your favourite faction is Grand Cathay, on August 29, 2003, you were at the American Legion Eagle Rock in LA, and for a solid 2 minutes you were chanting not for your favourite wrestler, but for your favourite faction. When you watched Shrek, you weren't jealous of Shrek for getting the princess, but of Donkey for getting the dragon. Your internet search history is questionable, and you spend far too much time on Nexus mods. The bottom line that I'm trying to get at is that you're a bit of a dragon enjoyer, a dragooner, if you will. You can cope all you want and say that you like the harmonious nature of the faction or you just really like burning money on caravans that always get killed. We all know that you're just here to see the mean lady or one of the dudes we don't judge turn into a big old dragon. If you're a Greenskins main, then you absolutely always get on the mic whilst playing multiplayer games and you're constantly talking insane levels of trash when you're not screaming at every death or loss. Your team may try their best, but loss of any kind sends you into a fury, the likes of which haven't been seen since the days of the Xbox 360. You only ever have one strategy in every game: relentless attack. It don't matter if it's Total War, Call of Duty, or Peggle, you're moving full tilt forward no matter what, regardless of what anyone else has to say. If they want to challenge you for leadership of the team, they can step right up and do so. They just better ready their ears for the screech of your wah. If the High Elves are your favourite faction, then you are the vanilla ice cream of people. Don't get me wrong, vanilla, it's a great flavour, but spice is the spice of life, and you don't know the meaning of it. You put salt on your eggs one time, and that was way too spicy, so you know to stay in your lane. For breakfast, you have plain porridge with a glass of milk, white bread cheese sandwich for lunch, followed by chicken and potatoes for dinner. This would all be fine if you didn't just have such a high opinion of yourself. Like, yeah, we get it. You've spent years perfecting the recipe for plain porridge, and truly, no one does it better than you. But why would anyone want that in the first place anyway? At least put some cinnamon on there. Prowess doesn't mean squat if it's in a useless skill. Khorne mains are the true personifications of rage. The Greenskins are mad and all, but they're mostly bark. Khorne swaps that up for almost entirely bite. If you slightly cut in front of them in traffic, they'll run you off the road and rip the head from your shoulders to place on their IKEA gaming chair. After all, that throne has got to start somewhere. The heat in their homes is turned up to the max year round and they steep in their gamer sweat, just waiting for their next excuse to start a fight. They're also the only mains that are canonically jacked, since all they want to do is fight, they have no reason to be preparing for anything else. Now if you main Kislev, you are truly terrible at making decisions. You can't be bothered to learn any playstyle in battle, so you just use the faction that is kind of okay at everything. When you play RPGs, you multiclass into everything and end up unable to complete the game since no one skill is good enough. You don't play Kislev for some deep love of their culture, location, or roster, you just don't know who else to pick, and that translates to everything else, both in your life and in the game. You just pick some of the multi-class units because they'll probably be alright at everything, so you don't have to worry. You order the family meal of Domino's food so you can have a bit of everything and slowly eat those leftovers over the next week. You're also probably a centrist when you vote, and I don't want to tell anyone how to vote, but at least choose a side. The left one. In conclusion, you can't make a decision, so I'm not too worried about you raging in the comments, since how are you going to decide what to say? If your favourite faction is the Lizardmen, since you were 6 years old and saw your first bit of dinosaur media, you've been obsessed. You've watched Jurassic Park more times than you can count, and you know all about the Velociraptor disappearing in the final scene and all those other little bits of trivia. You've watched every episode of Dinosaur King, and even got the DS game, which, I'm not going to lie, kind of sucked, but Fossil Fighters, that was pretty lit. Ross is your favourite friend, which is just factually incorrect because the Chan Chan Man reigns supreme for now and always. Nothing brings you more joy than setting up all your dinos and watching them tear apart your enemies. If you can help it, you will totally remove all infantry and other non-dinosaur units and just focus on those big exciting beasties running wild. You almost certainly run the Lost Car mod for even more dino fun, regardless of the balance. If it's big and has scales, then you're floating on air. Man, being a Norsca main must be pretty depressing. You are absolutely starving for attention like the middle child that you are. Not old enough to get Warhammer 1 updates, but too old to bother updating with Warhammer 2. And now Warhammer 3 is here, well, I honestly think mum and dad have forgotten you exist. Your Oonga Boonga mind rages with desire to be a functioning faction, let alone one that's good or fun to play. You sit in your ice-cold gamer chair praying to your dark gods for an update, and of course they don't answer because their mechanics are probably broken this patch. You long to hunt for new monsters but are again trapped inside because they don't work either. Seriously, how's that mechanic literally never worked? And though CA have finally acknowledged that you exist, there's no end in sight for your suffering. In short, you have no hunger, and you must bunga. If you're a Nurgle main, I can only assume you're a bit of a stinky hippie. Don't get me wrong, of all the Chaos gods, Nurgle is by far the nicest. I get that you just want to spread the love and pass the booth of disease to all you meet, but would it really kill you to take a shower? Personal hygiene is a phrase that doesn't appear in your vocabulary, and I really think that if you picked it up, you'd have an easier time bringing people over to your way of thinking. With the recent rework, it's more tempting than ever to melt into Papa's embrace. Just get some Febreze for the clubhouse and I'll be right there. If you're an Ogre Kingdoms main, then you have to be Okoi. There is literally no one else that tolerates, nay, enjoys the ogres, and for good reason. They really stink. And this isn't that Nurgle sickly sweet stink of disease and death. This is unwashed butt cracks, gingivitis-ridden teeth, and gums from overindulgence of people pot pie. Speaking of overindulgence, that's pretty much the ogre motto. When mom asks you if you want seconds at dinner, you practically bite off her hand, and you probably actually would if you could. If something needs finishing before it goes off, you're right there with a spoon at the ready, no matter what. Anything to allow you to continue cultivating mass. You've waited in the shadows, stinking up a storm for 2 entire game life cycles, and now your faction is finally here, and this is the best that they can do. Just do me a favor and shower once the DLC comes out, because once you swarm the game playing a hopefully viable faction, I don't want to have to wear a peg on my nose. If you're a Skaven main, then you really are a rat. I mean, they're one of the most overpowered and infuriating factions to fight in the game, so naturally, you'd be drawn towards them regardless of their rodent appearance. You're undoubtedly a cheese enjoyer and much prefer min-maxing to break the game over playing to have fun. Fun for you is a foreign concept. If you're not totally breaking the game and honestly defeating the purpose of playing it in the first place, then you're not happy. If you can't automatically win a game on turn 2 on Legendary, then you're not trying hard enough, and anyone that aims for anything less in your eyes should be eradicated. In your everyday life, you're likely a bit of a loner. I mean, who would want to be firm friends with someone who's always looking to stab others in the back and get themselves on top? It doesn't matter if it's your Warcraft guild or your job at KFC, you will always take the opportunity to suck up to leadership and begin building a plan to usurp them from the moment they make contact. If you know a Skaven main, keep your back to a wall and probably get some new friends. Is there much else to say about Slaanesh mains other than the horniest MFs you can find in the entire game? I mean, I'm horny on main for Isabella pretty much 24/7, but you made me look like a practicing monk in comparison to some of the depraved things you get into. You're constantly on Nexus mods installing some truly sinful additions to the game. You use Wallpaper Engine and install those wallpapers, so even when you've just logged in for the day, you're met with horny. There isn't enough hammers in the world to bonk down your level of horniness, so all we can do is contain it to a single faction. Now you might think you're a smooth talker and can seduce others, and while that may be true on occasion, anyone from the outside can see that you're full of it, and once anyone gets some clarity in their eyes, they're gonna run for the hills. Tomb King mains are undoubtedly extremely smug. They got one DLC, have remained relatively unaltered to this day, and would still be considered pretty strong by most of the community. Where others have needed reworks and updates, they've had some tweaks, but they landed in a strong position and have stayed that way and refused to elaborate the whole time. Outside of the game, Tomb King mains keep some of that smugness, but it's less about their superiority of mechanics and more about their general belief that they're above the common man. They see mistakes others make and judge them harshly for not having 1,000 years to think about the right way to approach each issue, and above all, they hate playing tennis. Playing against them, you have to start the game every time, and it can get pretty boring when your opponent does not serve. Tzeentch mains are all just gigantic nerds. They spend all their days collecting and reading books, when we all know that they could just watch the movie adaptation and get the same enjoyment. And they read some real dry stuff. Non-fiction, no pictures, hell, you're lucky if they have a cover image at all. Aside from this search for all knowledge, no matter how useless, they're also not to be trusted. They will cheat in pretty much any game you can throw at them and defend themselves under the guise of creative tactics. In battleships, they'll stack all of their bows on top of each other, and guess who? They'll look for a reflection of your character in your glasses or even just your eyes. Screen peeking, card counting, nothing is out of the question when playing with a Tzeentch fan, so it's best to avoid them altogether. And whatever you do, don't let them start their magic routine, or you'll be there all day as they pull all kinds of unknown horrors from within their hat. Let's get one thing out of the way first. Vampire Coast mains blast the trailer theme 24/7. It doesn't matter if they're at work, and by work I mean raiding fishing boats off the coast of Somalia, relaxing, or even sleeping. That trailer shanty is being blasted at full volume no matter what, and they're singing along the whole time. In conversation, Coast fans are almost impossible to understand. They constantly speak in slang and riddles, making conversation a total chore. They're also still holding out for that Total War Empire 2 announcement, and it's right there around the corner. Just let them get out 20 more Warhammer 3 DLCs, Warhammer 40k, and maybe another hero looter shooter, and they'll get right on it. Next to Norsca, Vampire Count mains are probably the most starving faction and the thirstiest, right next to Slaanesh. At least the Purple Demons have a functioning faction. All we have to make the hurt go away is the cool embrace of Mommy Isabella. We have our one mechanic and we begrudgingly use it, even though it really is quite terrible. When we're not crying over having one of the worst factions in the game, we're refining our gothic style, and we're not talking this modern goth BS, we're talking classic, full coverage gothic with big hair and giant dress clothes. Summer is a hateful season for all of us Vampire Counts mains. All that sun and heat is detestable, and a nice freezing winter with constant clouds and lack of sunlight is much more up our street. Not only do we perish outside under the burning rays of the sun, we melt into a puddle of sweat inside from the heat of our gamer PCs, having nowhere to go. One day, we'll get our update. But not today, so we weep. If you're a Warriors of Chaos main, you are the princess who kissed the frog, but instead of the instant transformation into a prince, you made out with that frog for like 6 years until finally, he didn't just transform into a prince, but a literal god amongst mortals. Now, if you're a modern Warriors of Chaos fan, you need to get out and stop taking up the seats of the real OGs that have been here for years. They were here during the dark days when the faction barely functioned and was about as threatening to the old world as a light breeze and a spring morn. These days are a literal apocalypse barely stoppable at all, at least by any one faction. Being a modern Warriors of Chaos fan is easy, but to be a real believer from the old days takes some serious dedication. Those real OGs are true gluttons for punishments and will do just about anything their masters ask of them if it means getting one step closer to some praise. Validation from their gods is all that matters, so if you want to get them on side, pick up some treats and get complimenting. The Wood Elves strike a true balance between the other elves in the game. Not only are they true centrists, but they're also fiercely defensive. Insult a Wood Elf and you're likely to get something hurled back at you, be it a sharp stick or a torrent of insults. They take stock of everything they have and take any attempt to disturb that, either intentional or not, incredibly personally. If you come into their homes and move a cushion on their sofa, they're likely to grab you by the scruff of your neck and throw you to the curb. If you take one of their fries at McDonald's, they will take your entire Happy Meal as penance and never eat with you again. If you stay on their good side and respect their space, they can be really great neighbors, and boy, do they know how to look after a beautiful garden. And that's what your favorite faction says about you for every single faction in Immortal Empires. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite faction is, and if you agree with your assessment, like, subscribe, and if you want more Warhammer 3 videos, then why not check out this one explaining every single faction in the game.